Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have a couple of stories involving weird phenomena. One, a Sicilian UFO encounter over a waterfront, and an encounter with this alien reptilian frog-like entity. Let's read the first article. UFO encounter over a Sicilian waterfront, lead soldier projects searing light beam on elderly experiencer. Let's get to this account and hear what this experiencer had to deal with. Late one night in Reggio, Calabria, an elderly woman's quiet evening took a shocking turn when a flashing violet light lured her to her balcony, only to find a domed metallic craft hovering silently over the water. What she witnessed next, a soldier-like being in a gleaming white silver suit projecting a searing beam of light into her face, would leave her questioning the boundaries between reality and the unknown. Ooh, that sounds incredibly terrifying, folks. And since it's still pretty much spooky season, let's get into it. An elderly female witness living in an industrial area of Reggio Calabria, Sicily, Italy, near the airport and overlooking the waterfront, stayed up late one night watching a movie on television. She was distracted by a flashing violet light coming through her window from the direction of the water, which reminded her of the lighthouse's flashing light. Okay? So far, we have basically mentions of an airport and of a, lighthouse, folks, with the flashing light in said lighthouse. So it sounds spooky, but the mentioning of a airport here, folks, is interesting. UFOs and alien beings have been seen over, airports before, folks. So that's not that surprising. Do you think that there's some sort of link, here? And what about basically the fact that this UFO encounter apparently took place near water, because this was over a waterfront, folks. So the fact that is another reason to suspect maybe there's a UFO base in the area near this waterfront, perhaps. Either way, let's continue with this article, folks, and hear the rest of this story. Stepping out onto her fifth-floor balcony, she spotted a dark, domed object that had apparently landed on the water directly across from her apartment. It emitted a bright light similar to that of a welder's torch, which moved about in a zigging and zigzag pattern. The object was large and completely silent. Soon she noticed a figure standing on the object. It resembled a lead soldier and wore a square helmet with two rectangular openings at eye level, along with a tight-fitting metallic suit. She could not see a nose or mouth on the figure, which remained still until it suddenly turned its head and stared directly at her. I would imagine completely terrified this elderly old woman, folks, but we'll discuss that more after we finish off her story. At that moment, a bright beam of light struck the witness square in the face, temporarily blinding her and causing her to fall back into her room. Despite this, she continued to observe the object and the soldier-like figure through the window. At times, the beam of light seemed to scan the area around her window as if searching for her. Eventually, the figure entered the object through its left side, and the craft rose silently, departing at high speed. Source, witness testimony. Now, what did this woman see, folks? It sounds like it could possibly be that this entity was some sort of machine. It also basically did not like that it was being observed by this old woman. And why was it there, folks? Remember, this was near an airport, and perhaps something was being transported through this airport that was interesting to this alien being. And the fact that this alien being was so close to water means that maybe it was nearby its base, perhaps. We don't know. Either way, let's move on to the next article. Frog-faced giant on Santa Lucia, a frightening 1964 encounter in rural Cuba. And listen to how this man encountered this giant frog-like being, who I think could possibly be a reptilian. Let's get into the article now, folks, and read the opening. In the humid summer of 1964, a quiet tobacco farm in Santa Lucia, Caribbean, Cuba, became the setting for one of the strangest encounters ever recorded. What began as a farmer's peaceful rest turned into a horrifying confrontation with a towering frog-faced being that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Ooh, let's get into this, story now, folks. I want to hear the entirety of it. In the summer of 1964, in Santa Lucia, Caribbean, Cuba, Rodolfo Garcia was resting after lunch inside the tobacco shed, a place he found calm and quiet. That afternoon, as he lay back on his cot, he looked up and saw a man wearing a strange outfit. Its face and hands were green, like those of a frog, and it had large, round, protruding eyes. It had no ears, and its mouth was only a thin line. The entity stood about as tall as two men positioned atop a wooden box and stared fixedly at the witness. So, I imagine that would be terrifying if you woke up to that, folks, but let's read on. Terrified, Garcia watched as the strange creature appeared to be trying to communicate with him. Suddenly, it emitted a loud shrieking sound that caused his eardrums to rupture, making his ears bleed. In intense pain, the witness fell from his cot. The creature then released a second shriek, after which Garcia lost consciousness. He was later found by one of his sons, who had grown concerned when Rodolfo failed to return from his nap. After regaining consciousness, Garcia recounted his encounter to his family. Alarmed, they armed themselves with rifles and machetes and searched the tobacco shed, but the strange being was nowhere to be found. Source: Rene Battista Marino, Vivista, Signos, Cuba. Another interesting story, folks, for sure. Do you think that, Garcia encountered perhaps a reptilian here, folks? It did have frog-like features, which reminds me of the Loveland Frogman, folks. Another well-known cryptid. But do you think there's any relationship or relation at all? I don't know. We can talk about a little more about that after we finish off the rest of this article, folks. Investigators' summary. This 1964 Santa Lucia encounter stands out among early Cuban humanoid reports due to the extreme physiological effects on the witness, including apparent ear trauma consistent with acoustic shock. The description of the being, green-skinned, frog-like, with large protruding eyes and no visible ears, fits loosely within the spectrum of amphibian or reptilian-type entities, later reported in South and Central America during the 1960s and 1970s. While no physical evidence was recovered at the site, the incident is notable for several reasons. First, auditory weaponization. The being's shriek produced immediate and measurable injury. 2. Communication attempt. The witness perceived the entity as attempting to speak or convey intent before the violent sound emission. 3. Physiological and psychological impact. Garcia suffered bleeding ears, unconsciousness, and lasting fear following the incident. Based on comparable case patterns, the event may represent an early instance of directed energy or sonic interaction by a non-human entity, possibly experimental or interdimensional in nature. The case was later revisited by independent Cuban researchers and contributed to regional archives of UFO science and humanoid encounters. So, it's good that this story was recorded so well, folks, basically being revisited later on to basically perhaps get more information, but it's good to know that this story is still being talked about even today, folks. It could be a first example of an encounter with reptilian beings, and maybe this being was testing out some sort of acoustic weapon on this man Garcia here, folks. I can't be for sure, but it still sounds very, very intriguing. Terrifying, but intriguing, folks. So was this alien being there to perform some sort of experiment on Rodolfo Garcia here? Or was it just maybe an accident? Maybe this being wasn't trying to harm Garcia, but it did so because it was an accident. Or what? I don't know. I can only guess at the real reason or basically intentions of such beings, folks. And what about the first story with this elderly woman who saw this metallic, being on a UFO basically near this, airport, folks? All I can say with that story, folks, and like this one, we don't know and can only hope that maybe one day we can get answers to them, folks. But at least in both instances, folks, we can basically surmise that both beings were there for a reason. This metallic being was near this airport, and his UFO was flying over this waterfront, which is, as I said earlier, folks, could be an indication that this being's base, maybe it was underwater, folks, and it was close by. And with this reptilian, that it was there to test, or basically try the test and communicate with Garcia. That much we can say, but we can't be for sure. Either way, both instances for the witnesses were probably both terrifying, and in both cases, folks, it sounds like both, witnesses were basically, older people. I mean, it sounds like both witnesses were basically old enough to have adult children, so that is an interesting fact. Do you think that may be one of the reasons why they were picked, perhaps, or maybe chosen? I don't know. Either way, we're at the end, folks. So please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics That Are Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions of the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell. That'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.